So welcome guys to today's session. Yeah, so this month we are having a series of Django sessions 3. Now this is the first one, which is being done by William Onchuru. Then we'll have the next one next Thursday. Then after that we also have the last one. So and there are such interesting topics as I've mentioned. So Geeks Talk Thursday is a community that was started in Eldoret, as even you can see the background picture from my screen I'm sharing. It was started in Eldoret, and the slogan is "Let the comics speak." I think this was started in around 2016, 2017 at Moi University. Then it expanded to Eldoret, and now just expanding. Yeah. So Geeks Talk Thursday is a community for developers to learn, engage, and share knowledge. And the website is geekstalkthursday.co.ke. I think finally it's up, and is now we solved this issue for all that. For some time back, it's been down, and the issue with the domain. I think we had to transfer it now because they had some downtimes, and yeah, and sorry for that. But if uh, everything is back, even the guys who had their blogs there, yeah, you can now go back, and we promise it the last time the downtime happened. So what we always do, we always introduce development to code, introduction to code and development. We always do code labs, have chats about different technologies, ideas, and platforms. We always talk about productivity, teamwork, and collaboration. We always do product review. Kindly get muted. Kindly get muted, William. Kindly, no. So then open source, yeah. Then other interesting activities to check out for Fun Friday is the for which also the community members follow is one for Fun Friday by Body. So this one is happening every bi-weekly. So tomorrow is happening. I think the link will be shared in the Geekstock group, and everyone on Twitter you can just go and search for Fun Friday by Body. Is always awesome. Just about text hanging around. Yeah. And the time is 4:30 by the 5:30 to change then. YouTube channels, Geeks to Thursday, where we post our videos every week. Then, yeah, also other interesting. And we'll keep updating these YouTube channels list there. So some channels locally. And I think after this, there are also other platforms which people explore other than channel. There are also some podcasts. We'll try and look them and share them with you so that you can always get in touch with what community members locally are doing. Great. And there's also 154 Kotlin, and they just for the Android guys. Events are back, and also there's Vue.js also, which I have to have added in this. So some community coming up. Then DreadCon KE, yeah, is happening next year. So you can check out dreadcon.co.ke for more information. Yeah. So find us on Geekstock Thursday on YouTube and on GitHub as Geekstock. So the speaker today, yeah, we are honored to have William Onchuru today. He's a software developer and also a student, and he's going to be the one presenting for us today. And I'm Magak Emmanuel. I'm a software developer, and the moderator of this session. Geekstock Thursday is brought to you with the love from Apps Lab KE. Yeah, so today's topic we are talking about creating custom user models in Django. So after this, I think I'll just stop sharing my screen, and William will pick it just from here. So William, yeah, now okay to go. And in case you're talking, I muted you, so you can just unmute.
Yes, can you hear me? Good evening.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the patience. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. I'm really sorry for that. So today we are going to talk about Django and creating custom user models in Django. So ideally, Django is a framework on Python that is really easy to work with. That I found easy to work with, I would say. So maybe a brief overview on the same even as we proceed. I hope you're seeing my screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. So ideally, to start, if I say for me, I use PyCharm, and it is you start the project and then give the name, and then Django there is makes it easy for you in terms of how it arranges the files and so on. So I'll go straight away into what we are going to tackle today. So ideally, there are four ways of extending the custom user model. I would let me show you first. Django normally uh, has a way of as a custom user model that it uses, which may be quite limited to some users. Let me create a user and then show you just a minute. So I'm creating a super user. Say call him Magak. We may leave that blank. Magak again. So that is okay. So we go logging in. The username was Magak and then the password was Magak. And log in. So ideally, you can see this the table called users, and then if I try to add users, let me see the kind of fields that it brings. It brings the username, the password, and the password confirmation. And again, there is the email address and the first name and last name. So ideally, that may be quite limited to someone who may want to maybe store some extra information related to the user, and which is quite limited with the built-in model that Django has both for the authentication. So that is why it is necessary many times to come in and build a custom user model that fits your requirements. So we have four ways of doing that. That is one, using the one-to-one field, and two, using proxy models, extending the abstract based user model, and then for extending the abstract user model. So with this, we would find that each method is coming in with its challenges in that what it can do. For example, the one-to-one field, you do it when you want to create some other information related to the user, but then is not related to the authentication to the authentication process. For example, what we have on the screen, suppose you are coming up with say a school system, and then you would want to store maybe the admission number, the age of the student, and so on. But then this information is not related to the user. So what Django does by extending the custom the user model using the one-to-one field, we are creating another table that is related to the user model. So we are not affecting the user model, but then we are just creating a different table which is related to it. And then secondly, for the proxy models, it's quite limited in a manner in that it only allows us to maybe add some methods to the user to how the Django user model behaves. And then for the abstract based user, we use it when we maybe want to change, say somebody, for example, by default we log in using the username and password. Suppose one would like maybe to change that and log in with something else, that is maybe the email and so on. And then for abstract user, by extending the abstract user model, we are overwriting the current user model, not overwriting really, but then rather adding some fields to it directly, rather than using the one-to-one field whereby we create a separate table. So ideally, by coming after you've created your project, um, we come and create an app. So Django has this idea of apps, and then say my app is called user, that you create using Django start app. The command manage.py start app, and then the name of the app. So by running that, for example, let's run that will be my app, something like that. And then so it has created the so it has all these fields, the admin.py. Ideally, it comes with these fields, that is admin.py, apps.py, models.py, test.py, and views.py. So we'll be exploring this even as time goes by. But for today, let me limit myself to what we are going to discuss today. So you would find that uh, mostly today we are going to deal with the backend part of it. That is how the Django framework handles the authentication process and storing information related to the user. So straight away, let's go to the one-to-one field and see how it works. So after creating the app that is using manage.py start app, for example, this app is called user manage.py start app user. I would get these files that are, as I hope you can all see my screen. So I come to this models.py file, and then by default, this is what, if I comment that out, by default, that is how the file should ideally look from Django.db import model. So that is where the idea of ORM comes in, whereby one can add create database tables using class. That is how ideally Django works. So from this, we want to extend the user model and then create a relationship with it, so that whenever a user creates a profile, say when a user wants to create his account, he also adds these details onto the user onto that, so that we are able to store all these details. Because as I said, Django is the the user is the user model is limited to the few fields that I mentioned earlier on. So we come to this model.py, and then from django.contrib.auth.models import the model user, and then we come and give ideally, so class and then the name of the table. This is if we go to the database, the table will have a user called we'll have a table called user profile. So we are extending the models.model, and then so now this is where the trick comes in that we are giving a variable and then giving it a relationship to the model user. So it has a one-to-one field with the table user. And then we add on delete models.cascade, because we want whenever a user is deleted from the database, that is from the other table, it also deletes this particular user from this user profile table. So we have the one-to-one field. um, in that we are using one-to-one because ideally we would want, if somebody is a user and then he has only one relationship with this at the other table, not so there's no way someone would have so many profiles. Ideally it should be one. So I want to keep it simple as that, to those three fields. So we have so many data types, that is integer, text, there's char field and so on, but I would like to limit myself to that. And then this is a method that whenever I go to the database, I would want to see that this uh, how do I want to see it? We see that in the admin panel. So after that, after doing that, after writing the something on the user profile, the table that we want to create, we run manage.py make migrations. Yeah, that's to create the database table. And then afterwards, we run manage.py migrate. After running manage.py make migrations, we run manage.py migrate. And then after that, it will create this the database table called user profile. So if I run that, it will say user, there's no changes detected because I'd run that before. So if we come to the admin panel, this is the Django admin panel, and I'm logged in as a user called Magak. we can see there's a table called user profiles if I try to add a user, you can see that already there's the relationship, because Magak is the only user that exists in the database as an admin. There is these fields that we added because we had 3 of them. There's the user that is relating with the other table called user, and then there's bio and age, which we had already created from our model here called user profile. So from that, there's something else. When we want to, Django has built-in forms which we may use to modify that. So we come, after creating our model, we come to forms.py. So forms.py does not come with the app. We create a new file and then call it forms.py. You cannot call it anything else. And then we import these modules above here from django.forms, import forms, from django.contrib, import user, then from django.forms, import model form and the user profile that we would want to use. So we want to utilize something called the model forms, whereby we are relating a given form to a given model. So from that, we come in and create a user form. If you can see my screen, and then give it to the class meta. Afterwards, we relate it with the model called user, which is already inbuilt to the Django app. And then we specify the fields that we want to be seen on the user that is on the interface. And then also now we want to create a profile form, because then relate it to the user profile that we created in our models.py. So afterwards, then we specify the fields that we want to be seen in that form. And then after we are done with that, now we come to views.py. Ideally, views.py is what handles how Django communicates with the front end. In that, if there is some data that we need to pass from the backend to the front end, that is where we ideally use the views.py file. So here is my index file. In that, if you can see this, if request.method equals to post, I want to check if this form has been submitted. If it is submitted, then we'll have to pick this form from, we'll see that later. We'll have to pick this form from the interface, and then get to pick data from it and then save it to the database. We'll come to that later. And then else we return, we are importing, remember, we are importing these from .forms, that is from the file forms, import the user form and the profile form. So if the form has not been submitted, then the view should return these these 2 forms to the front end, to the screen to be viewed. So ideally, this is supposed to return a request with a template index.html. So in creating templates for Django, ideally, if you've created an app, you right click on the app, and then, right click on the app, then directory, call it templates, and then right click again, call it the name of the app. You cannot call it anything else, and you cannot call it anything else apart from my app. So after that, after you've done that, now you can add files, that is HTML files, CSS files to it. But CSS, they are supposed to be in a static folder. I don't know whether I'm too, if I told anybody has a question, can feel free to ask. So that is what I wanted to show us for that time. So already I have the index.html file in the user app. So then one thing, for it to be rendered, for the user to see it, we have with Django, we have the main app, that is extend one. For this project is called extend one. So there is the root folder, that is extend one. It has its urls.py. In that, it's supposed to, whenever a URL is written on the browser, it's supposed to come to this urls.py and check if it matches that URL that is on the browser. So we would come and import path and include, so that is ideally the syntax for that. And then if it does not match any of this, if the URL entered does not match any of this, then that means that it will have to include the urls.py from another app. So when we create the app, we don't create it where it does not come with the urls.py. We create it to make work easier to, because many times if you have so many apps, it may be quite hectic to organize all those URLs and so on. So it is a good practice that we get to have all URLs pertaining to a given app in a given in its app. So you come to the urls.py in user app. So as you can see, we are importing all the views that are within that app. From this folder, import all views, and then if say the URL is blank, then call views.index. So this name is used to, for example, when we have on a navbar, we use this syntax to say mali kuna href kwa, that is on the navbar, say we use at URL. And then that is I was just showing us what this name means. You call it index. So if is a referenced as URL index, then it means that it should pick this view called index and render it to the screen. So we are done with that. Afterwards, we have called the form, the user form, and the profile form to the page. So let's go to the browser and check it out. Sorry. So don't worry about my interface, really. It's quite poor, but then that we will able to learn from that. So we have these fields for email, username, and password pertaining to the user. Remember, we had specified that here, that we want this field to appear on the form called user form. And then for the bio and age, they are pertaining to that is the profile called user profile that we had created, the model called user profile. So we have the profile form and the user form, and they are being rendered correctly to the browser. So after the user has submitted the data, that is where now we come to this if request.method equals to post. Ideally, that is the work of Django Forms. Django Forms does all that, the simplification of all that. So we are calling the profile form from the user, and then the user form, and then this line, if profile form is valid and user form is valid, that is to check if there are no any other errors, and all data submitted is clean to be saved. Then we get to use user equals to we save the form called user form, and then we come again and create a variable to save the profile form, but then we don't want to store it in the database. That is why we say commit equals to false, so that we don't get to save it to the database. And then the following line is associating this profile, whatever data that has been collected from the profile form, to this user form. If you can see that this user, so the profile dot user is we want to associate this data that is coming from the profile form to the data that is coming from the user form. In that, if I created my my bio and age, and I would want that data to be related to one another, because ideally I'm one person. And then after that, we can save the form, and then log in. After that, Django provides the method that allows us to log in, and then we redirect to another page. So let's try that out. Say use magak@gmail.com. Sorry, Manu, I'm using your name today. And then say which name do you use? mmagak, then mmagak is Manu, then age is 17, say. So that is some dummy data that we want to render to the views. But then again, now as we come to the view called home, which we are supposed to be redirected to, we want to see whether these two things are working. That we want to see whether the data that is pertaining to the user profile is being saved, and also the data pertaining to the user is being saved. So that is why we give the user, that is to return the username, that is from the user data, and then from the user profile we want to return the bio. So from that we give it into a context and then pass it to the template. The template is right here, home.html. So we are passing this to variables to the template, so that we want to see whether this data is related as it was entered in the database. So the username should be Magak, and then the bio is my name is Manu. So as you can see, it is being rendered correctly. So if I come to my admin.py in the admin dashboard, you can see that, sorry, Magak. So you can see a new user called Magak has been created in the user table. And then if we go to user profiles again, another user called Magak has been created, has been another that is pertaining to the same user has been also created. So there's another way of doing that. If I come to this, so ideally, if you don't want to use Django forms, then you can use the data coming from the database to be. Let me stop that server first. And then manage.py server. Really, that can be achieved using the data that comes from. So we want to get this data from this form to the database. So ideally, the difference between what we're doing on the other side with this one is that when we create our models.py, we are specifying, we have the same models.one-to-one field relating it to the user. And then what we are doing out here, we are importing something called the signals. That is in that the framework, this method will be able to be listening to any information, for example, any changes that may be occurring anywhere within the framework, so that it gets to do something at the end of it all. So what we are doing here is that whenever a user creates a profile, rather than getting to do that in the views.py, that whenever a user creates say gives some data using the user profile, and then the profile user profile form is within the same form. So as a user is being saved, the data that is being saved to the database is also being saved along with whatever data that is pertaining to the profile form, to the profile model. So it is like saving simultaneously to both files. That is ideally what this entire code here is listening to, as that the moment a user some data is saved to the user model, and then also we get to save data related to that user to the profile model too. So when we come to views.py, for that, we're still under the one-to-one field. When you come to views.py, all this that we are doing is trying to get the data from the form. And then as we scroll down, we're getting the data from the user form. And then we are creating a user. And then as we create the user, we are creating an instance of a user. And then as we create the user also, we are saving this profile. Remember, we had already specified in the models.py that as we save data to the user model, also we remember to save data pertaining to that user to the profile model. So I think I'm done with the one-to-one field. Let me handle something on the abstract user. So ideally, as I said before, Django has these fields that is the username, the email address, the first name and last name, and password. So many times maybe you would want to save some extra data that is pertaining to the user. So for abstract user, we are okay with what Django is doing in terms of the authentication, but we want to store some extra information that is not related to the authentication process. But again, we don't want to create an extra table. We want to modify that, the table that is already existing, to add these fields to it. So what one-to-one field is doing is that it is adding another table, is creating another table alongside the user model. And as you save data to the user model, you save to the profile model too. But for these, as we extend the abstract user, we are like adding these fields directly to the user model itself, so that as we access these data, is accessed from one table, not from the table as was before. So we come to the models.py. That's where we started, also on the one-to-one field. Obviously, the first line is always there from django.dp import models, and then to the second line, we are importing the abstract user. So we are creating a table called user, and it is extending abstract user. So already we want to retain the fields that are in this table called abstract user, but then we want to add some more to it without creating a separate table. So we add to them the bio and the location and the age and so on. And then after we are done with that, we make migrations and migrate that to the database. That is ideally to create the table that is pertaining to the user. So if I stop that server and show us the difference really. So as you do that from travel and sorry. So as you do that, you should also come to this settings.py file and specify that the user model that will be used now is not the default model that we've been using, rather, but then we'll call this from the app user, you call the model called user. So you have to specify this line is very important, that we not be using what Django uses by default, but rather we want to specify what now Django will pick as the user model. So it starts by the user, that is the app name, and then followed by the model. So we have the model already called user. That's why we user.user. And then we go to the admin.py and register. So ideally by registering, it means that we want to see this model on the admin panel. So after specifying that, we make migrations. And then one thing that I should mention is that one-to-one field and proxy models is okay. You can do it anywhere within your project. But then for this class, for extending the abstract base user and extending the abstract user model, we have to really do that before we can, as we start the project. So as you start your project, you would decide which class, which fields you would need and so on, so that you add them to this table, and then make the settings, change the settings before making any migrations to the database. Because if you don't do that, you may find problems running and making migrations. So if we go to the admin panel, maybe I run this server, manage.py, run server. If I run that, I'll have to log out. Let me create another user. It seems I've forgotten. So manage.py create super user maybe beyond the key. Okay. Then so as we log in with those details, we want to see what happens beyond the key. So as you can see, there's a difference between, maybe if I would open another browser, we run the server. No, that wouldn't be possible. So initially, the user group was under the users. There was another table here called users, if you are keen to see that before. Under authentication and authorization, there was groups and then users. But now we have overwritten that and taken it up to be under users. And if we go to users, if we extend these, if you try to add a new user, you can see there are some fields that are added that are not in the initial user, the bio, location, and age are added to the form, which were not there initially. So what we have done is we have added some fields to the user to the abstract user model, so that we don't have to be creating an extra table that will be handling that. So ideally, that is what we were supposed to see. So after doing that, then it's the same all through. Go to the views.py and then get to render the form to the user, and then as they create the profile and enter their data, then that means that the form is saved as one, rather than having to create two different tables, which may not be ideally the best. So depending on what maybe somebody would want to do, that is how we can extend the user models. So the difference ideally between abstract based user and abstract user is that whenever when we use abstract user, is that we want to store data to the same table that is not related to the authentication process. But then when we extend the abstract based user, is that we want to store some data that is related to the authentication process. Say you want users to log in using the email and not by default using the username as Django operates. So I don't know whether there are any questions on that. I think I've finished up on my presentation for tonight. Somebody calls Joe Collins Juma. Yes.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you for the explanation and the guide. Actually, I'm new to Django, so I would
Yes.
like to maybe just ask, how do you install the front-end scaffoldings? Because I've
So,
seen your dashboard, or
sorry,
does Django comes the default front-end scaffoldings?
I'm
Like
not
for
getting you
example,
really.
maybe sorry, hello,
Yes, I can hear you, but then kuna
I'm
vile una
asking,
katika. Yes.
I'm asking,
Yes.
how do you install front-end scaffoldings in Django
Oh,
applications?
front-end stuff in Django application. So say you want some
Yes.
bootstrap content to. So ideally, let me show you
Yeah.
just in a.
Okay, sorry.
You see, whenever we create the Django application, we have that. So we, for example, let me use this project so that I can be able to explain to you easily. So as I said, we have the static folders and the templates. The templates are what is going to be rendered to the screen. And then for static is like the images, the CSS that we want to add to this, the JS that we want to add to the project, and maybe Bootstrap that we want to add to it all. And these are the external folders that we may want to add. So when, for example, you're in this app, to create say sorry, let me start another app so that I show you. Manage.py start app, my app. This is a new app that we want to create so that I show you. So the app is there, my app. So we want to add some maybe bootstrap files to it so that we get to link to it. So we come and deal with the templates pertaining to that file. Under the my app, you create a new directory called templates. And then under the templates app, you call it the name of the app. You create a new directory and call it the name of the app, my app. So you can store your templates inside the templates app, inside the my app folder under the templates. So you come again and create a new directory called static for storing the images and the CSS and so on that we have, and then create another directory under it. Call it the same name. You cannot call it any other name called any other name apart from that. So say okay, and then under that now you can create an say style sheet or a JavaScript file. Say call it style.css. So from there we can be able to add this styling that can be in that app. So to save on time, let me show you something. So ideally, these are the files that, for example, we have style.css under the static file. That's the static folder in the user app. So we would come to the templates. Under templates, there is a folder called minute. So from that, we have to load as these Ginger tags and call it load static to load the static files that are within the folder. And then this template is supposed to extend what we call the base.html that is found in the Tours app. So if we call, suppose, no, so now what we are doing is creating a template. And then instead of like going and adding the navbar, the footer to every other template that we have, we can create a custom template. We can create a common template all along, and then get to add some blocks within it. A minute. So this is at the template that has the navbar and the footer and so on and everything else that we have. So when I extend from this template, there is this block content that we have here. If we come to index.html, we'll get that block content somewhere within the body of that template. So it starts by block content. So where the navbar, where the block content starts is where the data from these what would I say? From this template will be rendered to that base.html. So it's picking all the elements of that base.html and then adding to these all. So we want to load the static files that we had before. So as we are coming to this base.html, we load the static file. Don't forget this tag, load static. And then we're coming to link as normally as we do in the normal HTML. But then now what is changing is these static tags. Instead of say coming to user stroke CSS, and we are loading the static files from the app to us under the folder CSS and then font awesome.css and blah blah. That is it. So we can import ideally from any other app that we have within this project. For example, if I try to import that file that we created called style.css under the apps, under the user app. So you're using an IDE, it could be easier. Load the Ginger tags and then static, followed by the single quotation mark, and then the app name, and then the folder that contains the ideally that is style.css. It's not under any folder, so that is how we load it. So any styling that was in the style.css will be loaded to this template. I don't know whether I've answered your question. And that is what we do even ideally with the images that we want to display on the screen. For example, this image is supposed to be displayed to the screen. So we would do that, for example, static, and then say in tours there are some images, and then images, and then say any image that we may want to load to the screen by that. I don't know whether I've answered your question, Collins.
Yeah, sure. So maybe like if you want to add other like, yes,
Yes.
I'm saying,
Yes.
yeah, you've answered that one. So maybe like if you want to add some other external libraries, you simply import, because I was seeing some imports.
You put them in a folder, say in a folder or under you have to you, in the idea is that we want to organize our whatever content that we want to load externally. So we put it in a folder under the static folder, because the templates only handles the templates. So everything will be under the static folder. And then as you come to the template, you load static first at the top of the page, load static, and then under the reference, that is href, we load the ginger tags, and then static followed by a single quotation mark, and then the app name and whatever content that you want to, be it Bootstrap, be it JS, be it CSS, and so on.
No, sorry, for example, I'm saying if you
Yes.
have, let me use an example, maybe you want to add a DOM PDF.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do you add such kind of, I think it is kind of a library. So do you import it directly?
I don't know whether Django supports that, but there are some built-in forms that, for example, if you wanted to style this form, this form by default is sorry, there's that form that you are seeing, the registration form. There's some built-in Django app. There's some built-in Django libraries. For example, Django, say come and say pip3 install Django crispy forms, Django REST framework,
No,
and
sure.
so on. There's
Thank
some
you. Now
built-in,
that is what I
yes,
want. Okay.
there's some built-in files, but I
Yeah.
don't know whether Adobe, like the likes of Adobe, is supported.
Maybe DOM PDF. So, I guess most of the backend supports DOM.
I don't know. Maybe I research on that and get back to you. I don't know whether there's
But
any
I
other
got you now.
question.
I wanted that tip. Yeah. I think we can.
Okay, no issue. I hope there's no other question. That was it for this session. Thank you very much for being around. I hope we've learned something. Na poleni sana kwa kuweka. I'm sorry for putting you. Thank you. Manu, I think I'm done.
Yes. William, thank you for
Yes.
that awesome session. So, because there's no other questions, I think thank you all guys who attended this. So we'll we'll be uploading this video just a week after this, and we'll be having another session next week. Watch out for the next session. I'm going to put up the link on the description tomorrow. So, and yeah, thank you once again, William, for this for the opportunity and having created your time to present for us. Thanks so much. So,
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
so I'm just going to stop the recording.